Hi everybody, it's Sheena here, back with another video question and answer. And today our topic is around estate planning. A question that I get often goes like this: how can I set up my estate to avoid probate? So let's get started. I'm going to first just define probate. It's the formal legal process that includes authentication of a last will, appointment of executor, and distribution of assets to beneficiaries, either per the will or by state law after a person's death. So in a nutshell, what that means is the court going to be involved passing assets to your heirs or not? Probate, it gets a bad rap, but it's not always a bad thing. I think what people get hung up on is that it's just another step in the process, and it can make things a little bit more complex. And usually when someone's naming an executor or a representative of your estate, it's typically a son, a daughter, a family member. And so you want to create as little burden as possible on that person. So let's look at some common reasons why we want to avoid probate. And I kind of just mentioned some of them. But the big one is that it can be slow. It lengthens the process, passing your assets to beneficiaries, going through the court, going through attorneys. It can take several additional months. It also can be costly. There's court fees, there can be attorney fees, and other types of costs associated with probate. Some people, it's important for their estate to be private, and when assets go through probate, it does become public record, and it can be stressful. Again, going back to complexity, it's just kind of one more thing to deal with at an already difficult time. So let's drill down into strategies that help avoid probate. So some assets already have beneficiaries built in, like retirement accounts. If you've got a 401k or an IRA, you already are required to name beneficiaries. That's also true of life insurance. So anything with a beneficiary already will pass directly to those individuals or entities. And that's one way to avoid probate. That's a big one. A lot of assets pass by naming beneficiaries. Starting at the top of this list, a living trust is one way to avoid probate. This is not a video about should I have a trust or not, but I will say I think that's one common point of confusion, is that people think by simply having a trust, that's the only way to avoid probate, and that's simply not true. It's one way that helps, but there are other ways to keep the process simple, get those assets to your beneficiaries, and you don't always have to have a trust. In fact, often you don't have to have a trust. If you have a living trust, that means that you can title certain assets to that trust, not retirement accounts, but capital assets like brokerage accounts, your house, other real estate, maybe a business. And that serves as an entity that can then pass through to the beneficiaries named in that trust. Definitely consult an attorney if you think that is one part of planning that you would want to entertain. Another way to avoid probate is to gift during your life. So if you gift cash, securities, real estate, any other types of assets, well, that asset no longer is in your name, and so it would no longer be included in your estate, so it would not go through probate. The other top 3 ways that I like to recommend people with their estate planning, I'm going to talk about next, listed here, numbers 3, 4, and 5. Joint ownership titling. So kind of going back to what I mentioned about trust titling, joint ownership titling also helps, because if one of the joint owners passes away, the automatic ownership then defaults to the surviving owner. So it's kind of like having a built-in beneficiary to something that might be jointly titled. And then also too, kind of going back to naming beneficiaries. Payable on death registrations can be added to bank assets, whereas transfer on death can be added to other capital assets. A transfer on death deed is very common to add to your house. Again, payable on death accounts, you can add beneficiaries to your bank accounts. And so those really are key ways to help avoid the probate process. And, really in today's world, especially in the state of Wisconsin, a lot of people can get by with just having a will and then naming beneficiaries on everything that they can, as well as jointly titling certain assets. So all of those steps really go a long way. Sometimes trust planning is necessary, but oftentimes not. So these are various ways that can really help out to avoid probate. And then, of course, with any type of planning, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be monitored. And so I always recommend for people to every year, maybe every 2 years, to have some kind of organizational system to be able to check and double check that accounts are titled the way that you want them to be, beneficiaries are named the way that you want them to be, and then making updates if necessary. So that's what I have for you today regarding avoiding probate with your estate planning. I hope you found this information to be helpful, and if you have questions, please just reach out.